Good morning and welcome to this video demonstration. I'm going to demonstrate obtaining and installing VirtualBox 6.1. If you're watching this video because it's related to your virtualization course, this is one of the products that we're going to use. If you're watching this video because this is related to the Linux course, this is another way of getting your work done. What I'm going to do is install VirtualBox. I'm not going to install VMware Workstation 12 because it's already up to 15.5 and I've already got it running. What I will do in a subsequent video is to demonstrate the upgrade process for Fedora Security and Fedora 31. I've got an ISO of FedSec 31 and an ISO of Fedora 31, both of which I'm going to upgrade using the command line to show you how that can be done. So if there are parts of this video which don't directly reference the course you're taking, don't worry. This video kind of touches on the things we might do in a couple of different courses, both the Information Technology Security course and the Linux course. Thanks, and let's get this started. So of course the first thing I'm going to do is download VirtualBox 6.1. And I'm going to go for my Windows hosts. Now one thing you're going to want to do, make absolutely certain is that you're grabbing that your system can support it. And the other thing to know, so that might actually mean making some changes in the BIOS. I might have referenced those in other places. I don't need to do that here because I've already done it. Otherwise, my virtualization products wouldn't work. But if you set up a hypervisor, type 2 hypervisor, and then you try to build a VM and it doesn't work, either the hypervisor won't let you start the process or won't let you boot the VM. In either case, that means there's a real good chance that you need to go into the BIOS and turn on the virtualization extensions, depending on whether or not it is the BIOS is built for an Intel chip or an AMD chip. The nomenclature might be a little bit different, but in either case, you can go into your advanced features in the BIOS or your UEFI firmware if the system is new enough, and make those changes. Otherwise, it just won't work. So I've got my VirtualBox 6.1. Now, this is something that you'll need administrative access to do. Now, if you're doing all of this for the virtualization course, you might not need to do this, depending on you don't necessarily have to do this at home. I do suggest playing with multiple hypervisors on your personal machine. But if your personal machine doesn't have the horsepower for it, don't worry. We've built this virtualization course around a Cengage MindTap course. So all the labs you need to do have actually already been virtualized in the cloud. So you will essentially be using cloud-based workstation virtualization from day one as an end user, not so much as a builder or a maintainer. But okay, so I'm going to deploy literally everything. VirtualBox seems to want Python 2x support. Python is actually somewhere north of version 3.0 right now. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that might happen, but guess what? I'm recording offline, so that's okay. This is actually the process of actually installing most hypervisors is fairly simple. With VirtualBox, because it's free, you don't even have to worry about having a license key. In the case of VMware Workstation, you really do need a license key. The good news there is that if you're a TSTC student watching this for a TSTC class, you have an account, or should have an account, with On the Hub associated with your TSTC email address. If you're having trouble with that, contact your instructor. And I'm going to trust the software. I'm going to install the software. It's right into the registry. One of the things I've found, if you have to change your license key for VMware Workstation, you, or rather say if you don't change versions, but you will have to roll over your license key, there's a really easy way to do that. You can actually create a registry entry, sort of a registry key that you can integrate into the Hive. So we're going to start the system, start it. Just going to go for and go ahead and do this. Um, Interestingly enough, it didn't ask me for administrative access. Cool. And I'm gonna, okay, here, VirtualBox, it's hiding. Okay, so this is our VirtualBox screen. I've got a number of tools and settings. I can pin that. Let me look at my media, optical disks, floppy disks. Okay. What I'm going to do now is actually get this process started. I'm going to create a new machine. I'm going to call it NST31 upgrade. And one of the things that's kind of important here, technically speaking, you don't have to make sure this type and version information is right, but it really does help. The hypervisor is going to make come to some conclusions on the basis of what you tell it about the VM that's running, whether it's Windows or Linux, how much RAM it needs, etc. The thing to note there is that unless you have a really good reason, don't go with the minimums that they suggest, particularly if you're dealing with Windows. What I'm going to do here is actually choose Linux. And there are a bunch of different versions. I'm going to call it Fedora 32-bit, 64-bit. And that comes out of the box telling me it wants a gig of RAM. I'm actually going to pump that up to 248. That's essentially 2 gigs. Notice over here, I've got about 32 gigs of RAM in this machine. Notice that it considers this maxing out the RAM kind of to be the danger zone. So definitely don't do that. And I'm going to create a hard disk. The problem here is that that 8 gigs is not nearly big enough. I'm going to have to fix that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it as is. Now, notice you can actually change these things. VHD is the Hyper-V settings. VMDK is VMware. VDI is Virtual Disk Image, not to be confused with Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. I'm going to leave it at as is for now. Dynamically allocated. This is what we call thin provisioning. If I would go to fixed to a fixed size, that would be what we also call thick provisioning. A thin provisioned disk will only need use as much space as it actually needs. A fixed disk, a thick provisioned disk, will earmark the entire as much space as you tell it about that hard drive. So if you ask for an 8 gig drive, you'll get an 8 gig file, even if it's mostly empty. And that's not enough. I'm going to give it 15. Now, one thing to note, this is not an issue now because this is a 64-bit OS. But if you were using a 32-bit OS for your image, you really wouldn't want to give it more than 4 gigs of RAM. Because by definition, a 32 gig OS can't really use more than more than 4 gigs of RAM. There are some things you can do to allow a 32-bit OS to use more than 4 gigs of RAM, but really and truly, you're probably wasting your time. And one other thing, I need to fix something here because I haven't pointed it at the ISO yet, so I can summarize all these things. Notice that it's got the VTX, that's the Intel flavor of virtualization. AMD-V is AMD virtualization. Nested paging and KVM paravirtualization, those are related to I/O and memory management. So let me go into settings because I still haven't pointed it at my ISO, at my controller. Let's see, system, optical. Yes. Processor, yeah. 1 CPU. Okay, I can tell it how many CPUs I want. I'm not going to tell it tell it to use all of them. I'm not going to tell it to use PANEX because that would expose the physical CPU to the client. Not a good idea. IDE. Oh, and this is okay. Yeah. What I'm going to choose it now. What I'm going to do here is choose a disk file. Otherwise, it's going to look for a physical disk. I'm going to go to my ISOs directory, and I'm going to choose Fedora Workstation. Okay, I'm not going to tell it. I'm going to tell it. I'm going to leave it. Tell it. I'm going to tell it it's a live CD. Okay, so I've done all the setup. I'm actually going to stop here. I'm going to do the the install in the next video.